Brian Costello is kind enough to join us. He covers the Jets for the New York Post and for WFAN in New York. You can follow Brian on Twitter at Brian Coz, C-O-Z. Brian, normally we ask people how are they faring, how are they holding up during these tough times, but we want to offer our condolences to you and everyone at the New York Post. You lost a beloved colleague yesterday, Anthony Causey, to the coronavirus, and I didn't want to just ask you how are you doing during these times without offering our condolences.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Anthony was a special guy, a great photographer, a great guy, and we're all, having a tough time at the Post right now. This thing is touching everybody in the country, and it kind of hit home for us with Anthony.
Well, it's touched everybody in the country, but obviously New York is the epicenter. Brian, I don't know how you can be positive coming off of news like that, but anything on the weekend, are there any spirits starting to lift? Before we get to the Jets, because we can talk about football all day long with you, but being in New York, are you seeing any signs of hope? Are some of the stories that we're seeing, the numbers going down, do the New Yorkers feel like they're getting closer?
Yeah, but it still feels a long way away. The numbers of people going in the hospitals going down, but the deaths are still very high every day. I think until those numbers drop, it's going to be hard to really feel too positive about things. But my approach to this thing is that you can't think too far in the future because you start driving yourself crazy when you start thinking about when this might end and when we can come back to normal life or whatever normal life will be like after this. So it's just kind of taking it day by day right now, and I think it's hard to stay positive, but everyone's trying.
And yet Brian has a day job, which he's still actively doing because the NFL draft is just 10 days away. Brian Costello of the New York Post and WFAN kind enough to join us. I think the Jets are in an interesting spot in the draft, that there are certain teams that could begin runs. Like, first off, what will the Lions do at 3, with the quarterbacks? But then you get down to, then we think some offensive tackles are going to go. What are the Jets thinking at 11? Are they going to draft an offensive tackle because goodness knows their line needs it? Or do you think the Jets at 11 start the run on wide receivers?
I think it depends on what happens ahead of them. I think ideally they'd like to get a tackle to protect Sam Darnold. Their line was terrible last year. They had about 52 sacks. They were 32nd in the NFL on offense, and a large part of that was because their offensive line just didn't open holes for Le'Veon Bell and couldn't really protect Sam Darnold in some games. So I think they'd love to take a tackle. Now, it's pretty clear that there's 4 tackles in this draft that are head and shoulders above the rest of them, and some of these mock drafts have 4 tackles going in the top 10. There's also a chance that the Jets have 3 ranked ahead, that they don't like the 4th tackle, and then they would only want 3 of them, and that's something I don't know. I haven't seen the draft board, obviously. So when it gets to 11, it's going to be a question of, what tackles are available, and is there one that they still like there? And if not, then I think maybe they draft a wide receiver, and like you said, that could be the beginning of a run on wide receivers with the Raiders behind them and looking for a receiver. I think the 49ers could even draft a receiver. So they could start a run there if that's the way they want to go.
If the tackle's not there and somehow, some way, a quarterback slipping or somebody slipping, would the Jets entertain trading down? Or if the tackle's not there, because there are so many needs, receiver being one of them, as you mentioned, Brian, do they have to just stay at 11?
Yeah, that's going to be an interesting decision for Joe Douglas, because the Jets have so many holes. You can basically look at the roster, and other than maybe 2 or 3 positions, say they can take a player at that position. They need a player at that position. So I think if Joe Douglas, isn't in love with a player at 11 and someone wants to jump up there, I think he will be very open to it. He spent 15 years with the Ravens. That's where he learns his craft under Ozzie Newsome, and Ozzie Newsome was always very good at moving around in the draft and getting more picks. That's the Baltimore philosophy, is kind of take as many swings as you can at this. So I think he wouldn't hesitate to move back if the right offer presents itself.
He's Brian Costello, New York Post, WFAN in New York. Follow him on Twitter at Brian with an I, Coz, C-O-Z. O Z. How come Joe Douglas hasn't spent more money this offseason? I mean, this is one of the few moves the Jets have made as an organization in recent years that was universally praised, was the hiring of Joe Douglas.
Yeah.
And this, he didn't get a chance to take a bite at the draft in free agency last year. He got acquired, after the draft. I was surprised, to say the least, that the Jets, with as many holes as you reference, didn't spend at least, decent money, some money, make more moves. I mean, why?
Well, I think there's a couple things. I think he had a choice. They had about $50 million in cap space when things got started. And that sounds like a lot, but it's really not when you start breaking it down with all the holes the Jets had. So I think his choice was, do I go out and buy a really expensive piece, one piece, and then maybe I can only add 3 or 4 more players? Or do I spread this money around in the kind of the second tier of free agency? And he picked the latter. He signed they signed 15 players, so they didn't make a lot of moves. They just didn't make a lot of splashy moves. Now they're down. They're like around $10 million cap, so it's not like he's hoarding the money.
Right.
They will get $11 million in June once Tremaine Johnson comes off the books. And I also think his philosophy is that free agency does not really work. That's not the way you build a team. If you look at the Ravens again, like I referenced, that's where he learned. Ravens don't spend money in free agency usually. They signed Earl Thomas last year. That was the biggest contract they'd ever given out in free agency. They make trades. You got Calais Campbell. They do that kind of thing. They don't usually throw around the biggest money in March. So I think it's philosophical, and I also think it was practical that they just didn't have the cap space. And also last year the Jets spent $130 million. They set an NFL record. They spent $130 million in guaranteed money. You can't do that every year. I don't care. Even if you're worth $10 billion, like that's just not the way it works. Usually, the people do that one year and then they do it a couple years later. It also blew up in their face because Le'Veon Bell didn't have a good season. C.J. Mosley was hurt the entire season. So, I think ownership was kind of taken aback after last year, that spending spree, and it didn't work out. So I think it was kind of philosophical and also practical. They couldn't really throw a lot of money around this time.
Brian, that being said, is there a position that you think in the free agent moves that they made where you go, yep, they're better here now?
Center. I think Connor McGovern is a good starting center. They last year they had a combination of Ryan Khalil, who came out of retirement, and he never really clicked chemistry-wise with the Jets and kind of couldn't get his feet back under him. And then they had Jonathan Harrison, who's more of a backup. So I think at center they're definitely better. But you're right. I mean, other positions I don't look at it and go, oh, man, they're really better at this spot. Center's the only one. His philosophy on the offensive line is he threw volume at it. He signed a bunch of guys, and I think their ideal is come in, have them all compete, and start the best 5 guys who come out of this mix. Now, will those 5 guys all be top, linemen? Probably not, but that's what he's trying to do, and I think they'll add another one in the draft, at least one.
Is there any concern in Florham Park about Sam Darnold?
No, not in Florham Park. I think the fan base concern might be strong. I think the fan base has questions still. I think, but the people inside the Jets believe in him. They feel like they've seen enough signs that they know he's going to be a good quarterback. Now they know they just have to build around him and give him some help. Give him a better offensive line, give him some more weapons, and they feel like he's going to blossom. But we'll see if they're right. It's been hard to judge him through 2 years because the team has been so bad around him. And then he had the mono thing last year, which really messed up the season for a while. So, it's hard to come away with after 2 years and say you definitely know what Sam Darnold is.
With the money they had and not going out there, was there ever an opportunity to keep Anderson? I mean, I think that guy's a pretty good receiver. He ended up not getting the money that I think he thought he was going to get. So it kind of surprised me that maybe the Jets never at the last minute tried to keep him. How close was that to staying?
Yeah, I was surprised too. Because I thought if he got big money, if he got $14 million a year or higher, The Jets were going to be out. They were not going to do it, and I thought that was probably smart to let him go for that. But he only got 2 years, $20 million, and when you really look at that contract, it's a 1 year, $12 million deal, which to me is not crazy money. I would have kept him for that. I don't know if I would commit to Robbie Anderson long term, but I think a 1 year, $12 million deal is what to do. I don't really understand why they decided not to do that. I think they just decided they were ready to move on from him, but it was surprising to me, and I think Robbie Anderson's worth that kind of contract.
Talking the Jets with Brian Costello, New York Post and WFAN in New York. All right, Jets pick at 11. They pick at 48. They've got 2 third-round picks, including a high third because of the deal with the Giants. Let's just assume they come out of it with a wide receiver and a starting offensive tackle. They'll get 2 starters out of their top 4 picks, if you will.
Yep.
How good are the Jets then entering 2020 in your estimation? If they have a rookie wide receiver and they have a rookie offensive tackle, you plug and play starters. All right, we go into 2020. Where are they in the division personnel-wise? Second, third, fourth? What do you think their personnel is?
I'd probably put them third or fourth, depending on what New England does. New England's hard to judge right now because not only did they lose their quarterback, but they lost a lot of other players. They lost a lot of guys from their defense. So I'm kind of have a hard time even knowing New England is right now. And the Miami added a lot of players, so they're going to look different. So I think they'd probably be down in that area. They're definitely way behind the Bills. That's what's clear. To me, they're probably 6-win team, 7-win team maybe at best. Right now, if you add those 2 players, they still have so many holes. You didn't mention edge rusher. They don't have an edge rusher right now.
No.
They haven't had in 15 years. Cornerback. Right now, their starting cornerbacks would be Pierre Desir, and then you can stick your hand in the hat and pick out from Arthur Millette or Bless Austin or these unproven guys. So that's scary too. I think the key to this question is Sam Darnold, like we talked about before. Does he make a big step forward in year 3? Can he stay healthy for 16 games and really, does he do better in year 2 of Adam Gase's offense? That he's knows the offense now and comes in. Can he really make a leap in year 3? That would change everything. That's really the key. Sam Darnold is going to be the key to this whole thing for the Jets. How much can he carry this team?
Brian, once again, our condolences at the loss.
Thank you.
You guys suffered at the New York Post yesterday. All the best to everyone in the New York metropolitan area. Hopefully we can talk again after the draft.
Appreciate it. Stay safe.
You
Thank
as well.
You. Brian Costello covers the Jets for the New York Post and WFAN. They lost a very popular 48-year-old photographer, Anthony Causey, yesterday to the coronavirus. So that is what we are speaking of. You can follow Brian on Twitter, Brian with an I, Coz, C-O-Z. I think the Jets are a mess, an absolute mess. And I really believe personnel-wise, they'll be on paper, I think they'll be the worst team in the division when the draft's over. I really believe that. I think they're a mess.
I don't disagree with you, David. I mean, look at if you were to pick third place right now, because we're so unknown with New England. But I'm sorry, I'll still pick them to be first or second because, well, Belichick's still the coach. I have more faith in the Dolphins than I do the Jets right now.
I do as well.
Wow. I said that out loud.
As well.
I know. I'm going to go drug test myself.
I agreed with you.
I'm going to go drug test myself during the break.